Excellent. All right, we are on. Well, thank you for joining me today, Mrs. Edwina Shaw, or is it Ms.?
I'm Ms. Well, you can
Ms.
call me Edwina.
Edwina. It's such a pleasure to have you here today. In the midst of all this, I love the look of your library.
I love the look of yours too. Yes, I moved in.
The way that our profiles are lined up, there's like books on either side, and then there's a gap closer together where it's just walls, so it looks like just sitting in the same room.
I've got the black shelves and you've got the brown ones.
Yes. One day I will upgrade to the black shelves, but for now we have the very mismatched op shop and garage sale bookcases.
They'll do, and lots of knickknacks as well. I like all the knickknacks. There seems to be a tail.
Yes, so I've got this one here is a taxidermied foxtail that I got from the Abbey Festival. Hang on.
Oh, yeah.
A little bit of show and tell.
Yes.
I just thought it was so beautiful. But it got a key ring that just fell off it.
Oh.
So you can attach it to things. But
well, people just used to wear them around their necks, you know.
Yeah,
not
just
quite
casual. But it's so beautiful, and I have an appreciation for taxidermy. There's something a little bit spiritual, I guess, about being able to reconstruct the dead into what looks like alive.
Yeah, a little bit creepy. If you've ever been to any of the catacombs in Italy, yeah, you don't end up looking too pretty.
No. And you know what? Even mummies don't look too pretty. So human taxidermy, probably not, but something that's fluffy, not too bad.
For birds.
Yes. Yeah. I've got knitting stuff up here. I've got guillotines and violins and drums and all sorts of things. So what have we got on your shelf? I can see a lot of pictures.
Yeah, a lot of artwork, photos, toys, knickknacks. I collect things. My sisters tried to make me throw it all out, but no, each one of those things gives me joy.
Excellent.
That's cool, isn't it?
I have the exact same opinion about every single book here. My partner has been like, we're not moving house. We're not moving the books ever again. Can't you get rid of some? And I'm like, no, every single one has memories attached to it. I got rid of a whole bunch of textbooks someone gave me, and that was it.
I did a big cull. I've only got books. So my criteria was only save the books that you will use again, that you would read again.
I like that.
I'm only going to read it once it goes. Once is enough.
Yeah.
Too many boxes. Yeah.
Oh, need like a conveyor belt for books, just that.
And they're heavy.
Oh, so how long have you been writing for?
So I've been writing and getting published since 2002. That was when I first did The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. Have you ever heard of that?
Yes, I have it sitting up here. I was going through it myself, and then I stopped when it said you've got to do the little contract saying you agree to feed yourself appropriately, and I was like, I'm not ready for that step.
Oh, I've done it every year since 2002. I'm in the middle of doing it again because it always builds a little bit of magic. But yes, it started me on my really dedicating my path to writing. I always wanted to be a writer as a kid. I tried to do writing at uni, but back in the 80s, there was no such thing as a creative writing degree. Certainly here in Queensland, there may have been in New South Wales. But so I ended up doing English literature, the honours part, and it was horrible. It just destroyed the love of reading as well as writing.
Oh no.
But I have read all of those books from the Middle Ages, a lot of 19th century prose that I really could have lived without. But yes, I've been writing and publishing since then. So I'm almost at my 20th year.
Oh, congratulations. Very well done.
Yes.
Which one was your first book?
So my first book is Thrill Seekers. So I did a master's in creative writing at the University of Queensland. And these were the stories that I had on the top of my head. So my brother developed schizophrenia when he was 15. So there were a lot of stories in my head about that I really needed to get out. And that's what I've ended up doing is teaching a lot of writing for healing. from my experience with Thrill Seekers, because I learned it's really useful because it's autobiographical fiction. It's not just straight memoir. It was very useful fictionalizing it because I could give my stuff to a character.
Yes.
It's easier then. And also I could change the ending. And also I was told to search for the light within the darkness, which was also a very valuable exercise. So it did very well. I had to wait. I signed a contract for it in 2007 with a small publisher in England, after a big name agent had picked it up here, but only shopped it to one publisher and then dropped it. I wasn't going to give up. It was about my brother. So I just ticked a few boxes at an opportunity through the Queensland Writer Centre and sent it off to England, transformed it from a 70,000 word collection of linked short stories into a novella of 35,000. And that's what it is now. But because of the GFC, it didn't actually get published until 2011 in England.
Oh my gosh.
2012, I got it here and I had to do all the distribution and marketing myself.
Oh my gosh. So you may as well have been self-published.
Yeah, it was a little bit better, a tiny bit better, but not much. But I did, I got shortlisted for the New South Wales Premier's Award for New Writing alongside Anna Funda and Fable Parrott. So, and Rowan Wilson and Peggy Frew. So I was pretty happy.
Oh, fantastic. What accolades.
Yeah.
It's such a fascinating thing because I'm completely self-published, but I find traditional publishing really fascinating because it does take so much longer, but there's more refinement to the process. You've got to have a lot of cooks and a lot of people that are checking your work at each step of the way.
Yeah, well, that's what I realized even just doing the distribution and marketing myself. Gosh, I wish I had a team, because it is, it's 3 different people's jobs.
Yes.
And then you've got the publicist as well. And, I had an editor, but it was so well edited by the time it got to him because it had been through the master's program. Yeah.
What a beautiful opportunity the Queensland Writers Centre was able to provide you.
Yeah, that was in the day when they used to have long lists of opportunities and competitions and things. Yeah,
that's exciting. I think they still have quite a bit to offer, but the entire landscape's changed. So
we can access lots online these days and find it that way, but it was handy. We used to get a hard copy magazine from them every month, so it was,
yes, I received a few of them just as they stopped giving them.
Oh, they're still doing them, but you only get like 4 a year now, or maybe 3.
Yes, yeah. Like a seasonal one or something.
Yeah.
Coming back to you writing about through fiction about your brother's schizophrenia, that is such a beautiful concept, being able to use that as a form of healing and catharsis. Because a lot of people, when we see particular media, particularly when we see like visual media, not so much stationary ones, but more movies or short clips and that sort of stuff, people find that really offensive and really affronting when you do see something that's quite traumatic. But through writing, it feels like it's still that little bit safe. It feels like we're able to explore and express things in a more controlled environment because it's a written word, and you can choose within your own mind to see as much or as little as you want from that.
Yeah, and I mean, that's for me the magic of reading and writing as well. With reading, no text is ever the same twice. So the person who reads Thrill Seekers has a different interpretation of it. Our job as writers is to try and get our vision as close as possible to what we want the reader to see. But because it's 2 imaginations coming together, it's a new creation every time. In some ways that applies also to movies, TV shows and so on, but they've done all the work of imagination now of presenting it to us as a fully formed thing. It's not activating our imaginations, it's really just activating emotion.
Yes.
So reading is a very special activity that should be encouraged.
Absolutely, 100%. And I think that people are able to take refuge in books a lot more easily. you can't, I don't know, maybe it's because people are really inundated with film lately. You've got heaps on YouTube, you've got heaps on different platforms, Netflix, streaming services. But when you've got a book, you're able, regardless of how it's written, you're able to see yourself within those characters, so there's less separation.
Yeah, there is less separation. Well, because you're interacting in the creative process. I think that's what the difference is. Yeah, that your imagination is contributing to the piece of art.
Yes.
Yeah.
Excellent. Now, did you have a follow-on from Thrill Seekers?
No, I don't have
No.
like sequel or anything. It's I'm actually working on some pieces at the moment called Dead Man's Beach and Other Stories, which are about that same time that I'm writing a straight memoir, because my father died when I was 14, my brother was 12, and we have 3 younger siblings as well. So it's really centered around that and about all the bits that I left out of Thrill Seekers, which is very much focused on my brother. So it was about my own, I suppose, adventures through grief as a teenager. Yeah.
Yeah. Again, very powerful. Memoir has a bit of an art to it as well. It's very different from fiction.
Memoir, you have to be very courageous.
I
just read Casey Kneen's The Three Burials of Lottie Kneen, which is a great work, and she's very brave, very courageous and honest, brutally honest about herself, and that makes the very best memoirs. I work a lot with memoirists, and yeah, that's what it takes, a lot of guts.
Oh yeah. especially if any of the other characters in the memoir are still alive.
Oh gosh, yes. Yeah, that's right. But I did another book for the publishers over in England. It's a chapter book for kids.
Looks very spooky.
Yeah, it is, In the Dark of Night. So it starts with a seance, and you know, a 13-year-old girl and her best friend do a Ouija board type thing with the letters, and they get a ghost who says, help me, and they have to, she then becomes physical, and they have to help her find her killer.
Oh
yes.
Oh, I like the sound of that. I thought you had a follow-on because I just saw a similar font on the cover of the Bielke Blues. Now that one looks a bit controversial. I like the look of that.
Well, I don't know if you grew up in Queensland. You're probably way too young to remember. Anyway, do you remember Joe Bielke-Peterson?
I know the name Joe Bielke-Peterson, and I remember him being referenced in a lot of jokes and in a lot of things while I was in high school. But I wasn't there when he was in government, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah, so he was in government for a long time. So he was premier from, I think it was 68 to 89, or that might have been, no, yeah, the fall of his government was 89. So he might have been in from even before then. He was in for over 2 decades. So I was born in the late 60s, which meant that he was the God King of Queensland for all of my growing up.
Yeah.
And under him, Queensland was a very repressive fascist state. It's already, I mean, it's still very conservative. Australia now is extremely conservative, but back in those days, there was also, he had control of the police force. So the crime was all orchestrated, or most of the crime was orchestrated by the police. Joe Bielke-Peterson was the police minister before he became the premier. So he knew exactly what he was doing when he put Terry Lewis into power. And he was the one who was famously actually found guilty of corruption. But they also, so when I was young, you know, I went off the rails a bit after my father's death, and I was out punk rocking all around the city. We didn't have to have ID or anything in those days. So we were out at all the clubs and roaming the streets, and anybody who looked different, if you were black, you were a target. If you were a long-haired hippie, you were a target. If you had a funny haircut, you were a target. If you know, basically it was, if you wore glasses and looked like you went to university, you were a target. So, and they had complete power. If they attacked you, there was nobody you could go to. You just stayed out of their way as much as possible. And he brought in a lot of drug laws as well. So people were going to jail for just like having a joint or two in their pocket. And often they would be planted as well. So that was I always wanted to do a collection of stories about that. And it was a great adventure that I did 2018, because I got to interview and solicit stories from a whole lot of activists who started, they were 10, 15 years older than me and had started being activists against Bjelke Peterson in the early 70s and late 60s. So people like Dan O'Neill, Carol Ferrier, Sam Watson, sadly no longer with us, Bob Weatherall, lots of punk rock heroes, and get their stories. So, the Springbok tour was here in 1971, and that's when Joe's violent streak really came out. That's when he imported a whole lot of police who removed their badges before they attacked all the protesters and beat them so badly. That a lot were hospitalized, including Peter Beattie.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was he really ran a brutal regime. It's got lots of funny stories as well about, people evading the police and how we got away with it. I've got a story in there too, told from the perspective of his cleaning lady.
Oh my goodness. Oh my gosh. That's incredible. That's something I find politics very fascinating. I am too scared to go into it myself because of the corruption and how easy it is for someone to be slandered without any repercussions to the people that are falsifying information. There's a whole big mess with politics, and it's not new. This has always been the case whenever it comes to anyone in politics. And it's all very divisive at the moment, but that sounds absolutely riveting. It's
well, he had that gerrymander in place too. That's why he was in power for so long, because country votes were worth more than any city vote.
Yeah.
So he rigged the system so that he could stay in power, and he suppressed all opposition, not just with the police, but also through the court system. He really harassed a lot of protesters, important protesters like, what's his name, the lovely guy? John Sinclair, who led the movement for the protection of Fraser Island. We wouldn't have Fraser Island as it is today if it wasn't for John Sinclair. We've got one of the last pieces he wrote before his death, which was before this book was published. And Joe took him through the courts and impoverished him. Basically, he had to leave the state. A lot of people left the state.
That's absolutely despicable. It sounds so fascinating, because one thing that I've realized is we don't get taught this in schools. We don't get taught about the how our governments are arranged properly, and we don't get taught about these people. So I grew up in New South Wales, and my grandfather and great-grandfather used to catch the train with Jack Lang, one of the premiers for New South Wales, and no one knew. I didn't know who he was until someone was like, oh yeah, no, your grandfather used to catch a train with that fella. And I'm like, who is this man? So you don't know until you go and do your own individual research. But the value in knowing that history prevents it from happening again and accelerates the good that comes out of these things. We know what to look for. We know what to stand up for. And we know who to speak to about getting stuff done.
Yeah, that's right. You've just frozen for me. Can you see me still?
Yes, I can see you still. The recording's probably still going to catch both of us pretty okay. But yeah, my internet is often on the fritz.
Okay. So with Bjelke Blues 2, it really consolidated. It was Sam Watson said, Joe was a tyrant and he was a criminal. He personified all that we were fighting against, but at least I'll acknowledge in that old basic physics formula about every force being balanced by an equal or countering force, that perhaps if we'd come up against a lighter, less extreme political opponent, we may not have developed into the sort of freedom fighters we've become. And it brought together all sorts of different people who normally wouldn't have come together. Aboriginal people found allies in the punks and the hippies and the students and the unionists, and everybody came together. Not only that, if it hadn't been for Joe, you know, there were 3 places in the world where punk rock began: New York, London, and Brisbane.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. So there is good that comes out of even bad, but, you know, we know all this about Joe. It didn't stop Trump. It didn't stop Campbell Newman.
Campbell Newman was definitely light on it, I think.
Joe was his idol. I'm sure if he'd got to stay in for longer, he would have copied a few tricks.
Oh, I've got a favorite YouTuber who does crime and makeup videos. She always says, one of her catchphrases is, "Get better idols."
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
Oh, so
Yeah.
Oh, that's so intense. That's really intense. I love it. I think I'll have to, that's one of the ones I would definitely pick up.
Yeah. Oh, I'll have them for sale at the festival.
Excellent. I will look forward to grabbing myself a copy. Now, to soften this, you've also got your guide through grief. When did that one come out?
So last year, this is my first self-published book.
Oh, beautiful.
So it's my foray into independent publishing. It had been sitting in my computer for 14 years. It's the book that I wish somebody had given me when I was 14 and my father died. It's got the tools that I wish I'd had when I was 21 and my brother died, killed himself. And it's the book I wrote after my infant son died when I was 40, when I thought I'd already written Thrill Seekers. I thought I'd, cleared all the shit up, but no. So I sat down, and the year I was grieving, the following couple of years, I sat down and wrote this book, putting in everything that I'd learned. So I'm a yoga practitioner. I've been practicing. I'm about to enter my 29th year and have my 28th yoga birthday on daily practice, which has been a very healing force in my life, but also the writing practices and other creative activities, visualizations, affirmations, things like that. Just really simply written with practical tools for people who are struck with grief for the first time and wonder what the hell is going on, because it's extreme. It hurts like hell. It turns your world upside down. Anybody who's experienced it will know exactly what I mean. You can't think straight to save your life, and you certainly can't handle a lot of those more psychology type texts that I tried to read when I was grieving. I quite like Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, but then a lot of the others just made me feel worse. I couldn't penetrate the language anyway. It was really academic. And so last year when I saw all the caskets in Italy and those horrible, lonely funerals, I just thought, well, I may as well get it out there, and it's there for people who want it. Of course, I need that marketing degree that we should all have. It's on Amazon, but it's on page 397. So but it is getting out there, and people who have bought it are coming back and buying copies for their friends. So I know it is resonating with people. I've also been running moving through grief workshops where I use the activities in the book, and I use a lot of it in my writing for healing work as well. Yeah.
Beautiful. A lot of people don't realize, like, they think that grief is something that will one day just switch off. Yeah. I recently lost.
You should be over that by now.
Why can't you do this simple thing? Because it was like 6 months ago that this other thing happened. Why aren't you over it? And it's just not the case. I lost one of my best friends to a car accident when we were 26.
That's very good. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Oh, it was a long time ago now, but he was one of the smartest people I ever knew. So it wasn't as simple as feeling an emotional thing had been taken away, but also an intellectual thing had been taken away. And I think that was one of the hardest parts of it. But he and I would always talk about this stuff, and we said that grief came in waves, and it was like, at first it's like a tsunami, and you're just completely obliterated, and then you take a breath and another tsunami comes. And then you take another breath and another tsunami comes. But eventually the waves slow and they get softer and gentler. And occasionally another tsunami might rock up on you, but it will again calm back down, and you will just get ankle lappers instead.
With the occasional big wave that you still got to watch out for.
Exactly. But
you're not looking after yourself, or you're suppressing your grief with drug and alcohols, or overwork, or gambling, or shopping, or hoarding, or whatever we do to suppress our emotions. That's what yoga taught me, actually. I went into yoga so I could look like Ellen McPherson. Failed that. But what happened was that it forced me to acknowledge my emotions very uncomfortably. I really had become very good at not looking at any of my emotions. But really the only way to heal them is to look at them. You can't just put a Band-Aid on top of a pussy sore. It has to see the air, and it has to be cleaned. So that's why we're given the creative arts, I believe, is to help heal our wounds by writing about them, drawing them, painting them, sculpting them, sewing them, singing them, playing them on the piano. We can release those emotions from our body because we don't want them in there. That just results in long-term illness and chronic conditions.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for joining me today, Edwina. So tell me, what are you going to be talking about at the Logan Writers Festival?
I think people who know me, everything I do a guided relaxation first. It's one of my mottos, is healing the world, one deep relaxation at a time. So it'll be very useful for writers. I'll do the one where we release the inner critic. We throw it out, basically. We send it from the room. You can tame that horrible critical voice and make it your best friend, but that takes, several years of practice. So first we just practice recognizing where our critical voice lives, giving it a face and saying, bugger off you, I've got work to do, so that we can get writing. And we'll do a writing exercise as well, because I like to get people writing. That's my thing.
Excellent. That sounds beautiful. And I think one of the things that I hear most of the authors I talk to, they say that they're too frightened to take that step. They're too frightened. They're worried they're going to annoy someone. They're worried someone's going to come back with some kind of controversy with them. So they don't send out their email newsletter, and they don't publish their book, and they don't put it out there, and they don't, give away their first chapter free, because they're so worried that someone is going to criticize them because they've been criticizing themselves this entire time.
Oh, yeah. And writing is a very, if you want to do it, it's not something you do as a sensible choice. It's something we do because we're compelled to do it and we can't stop. Because you have to be a very sensitive person, because we're putting our heart and soul on the page. You have to have a vivid imagination, which I think goes with that hypersensitivity. But then if you want to, and people don't have to, but those words are beautiful. And I know from teaching many, many years at the University of Queensland, it's often the people who are sitting there not saying a word who are sitting on the most beautiful pieces of writing. And your work deserves to be heard. So getting that work out there, I've got my submit, the 10-point plan. So 1 point per story, 3 points per full-length work, and keeping that 10 points up. Mine has gone sadly down to about 5 at the moment, but I have moved house. Because then we have to have a really thick hide, because we face rejection all the time, criticism all the time. And how do we do that and yet continue to write and submit? We just have to do it because we love writing, because of the joy of losing ourselves in the story and forgetting to have lunch.
Yes. Yep. You've realized that the reason you're like slowing down with your writing at the end of the day is because it's 1 a.m. and you've been writing for the last 12 hours. Like, why do I feel a bit stiff? And then you look at the time and you're like, oh, that's why.
Well, maybe I can't stay up that late.
On some special nights I can do that, but I'm definitely a 10 p.m. person.
If the story's going well, it can just, and that's the joy of creation, and feeling as if, our characters are taking over, the story's taking over, and we're just, the conduits for all the stories that are floating around.
That's an ancient Greek philosophy. They used to separate themselves from their art so that they could produce it. And the reason that they did that was because they thought that there was some invisible muse, or what they would call either a daemon or a genius, or a genii, and that would give them what they were meant to do. So if they made a really bad piece of artwork, regardless of what it was, be like, well, it wasn't me, it was them. But also, if they made a really good piece of artwork, they could then also say, no, it wasn't me, it was them. I'm just the channel for them. So
I think that's really important, actually. I mean, I know a lot of very science heady type writers don't believe that, and they sit and they slave over every single sentence. And I do after the first draft. But that initial spurt, if you step out of your own way, it happens a whole lot easier, you know, and you get into that channel and that flow. Liz Gilbert talks about it in her book, Big Magic, all the stories floating around. And she tells a lovely story of a story that she's writing, transferring from her to another writer that she kisses at a festival. You know, I think we do get tapped on the shoulder with the stories that we have to tell. And most importantly for ourselves, it's the stories that we have going around and around in our head, the ones that we can't get rid of. They're very important for us to get out of our heads and onto the page. So I've got a retreat coming up at the end of October, 22nd to 24th, up at Toowoomba, so not far. I try and keep these retreats as affordable as possible. I think this one is $380 if you get in early, $420 if you can't meet that, but that's the whole weekend, accommodation, food, everything. And it's all about getting those stories out of our head and onto the page, freeing yourself.
That sounds absolutely beautiful. Thank you. If you want, send me a link for that and I will put it in the comments below, or when you see this video go up, you're welcome to just pop it in the comments below so that we can get some people to go to your retreat. How many spots are available?
So I've got already about 8 spots filled. So I think I've got about 7 left. You've got to watch my repeat retreaters. They fill up all the spots. So if you want to get in, send me an email quick. I'll try and get a blog post up within the next couple of days, specifically on that retreat.
Wonderful. Excellent. Oh, I'm so excited to hear about that. I might have to get myself a spot to calm down from the Writers' Festival in September.
Yes, all you'll need it by then. But so I do 3 a year, 1 Magnetic Island, general narrative techniques, 1 in Springbrook for revision and feedback, and doing that second draft, editing, self-editing, and then this one, which is life writing and perfect for beginners.
Beautiful. Oh, that sounds absolutely splendid. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Edwina. This has been absolutely magical, and I look forward to seeing you on September 10th and 11th at the Writers' Festival.
Thanks, Rhiannon.